at that point, I'm losing my mind because I don't know what's going on with my baby. That's my best friend. I mean, I spend every day with that kid.
Your Honor, if I could approach, I have the deposition cuts with the couple of objections. I have a copy for counsel.
Oh. Just the two I can get this morning, right?
Yep.
All right, cool.
I apologize, I didn't highlight them, so I just put a bracket around them with my pen. But the first one is on page, well, the page in line is page 62, lines 3 through 10. And for context, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm there. Go ahead.
For context, this is the point in the testimony where we showed him the video of Lyric Williams in the hospital. That video has already been pre-admitted and authenticated, and Dr. Guthrie's asked questions about it, whether in the video Lyric appeared non-responsive. He describes it. He says it's hard to know if she's sedated or not. And there's an objection. He says that it's speculative on my part whether or not she's sedated, and there's an objection as the testimony being speculative. Our position is he doesn't know whether or not she's sedated, but that's beside the point.
Your Honor, if I could, the question is, did she appear non-responsive? He responds, hard to know without being there. And then he goes on and then says, again, speculative on my part. My objection is pretty clear. This is speculation by the doctor, quite literally.
Well, so to make sure I am understanding too, I think, so like you said, Mr. Pepperman, you played a clip of the video, and then you asked him in the video, did Lyric appear non-responsive? Was that?
Yes, that's the question. And the answer is, well, I don't really know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, no, I have the transcript right here too. So, agreeing to sustain the objection. So, and it might not just be speculation, it's probably more actually, you know, if it's, hey, Mr. or doctor, sorry, doctor, what does she look like in the video? I mean, they can see it. So, and he does say, you know, hard to know without being there. Again, speculation. So, objection sustained. So don't play 6203 through 6210. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. The next one is page 74, lines 13 through 19, and 75, 5 through 17, which relate to the same line of questions.
So 74:13. Has he seen it before? He got it yesterday. So what's the objection on 74:13 through 19?
So if you continue reading down, Your Honor, I think my objection becomes a little clearer if you look at the paragraph 75:5 through 75:10.
So do you have somebody else who's going to talk about, he says he doesn't do this, so do you have somebody else?
Well, Your Honor, yes, we have an expert, but that is the point of the question, is for him to say, I don't do this, I'm not the one making a judgment on these pathologies.
I'll defer to whomever else. Any response to that?
I mean, I think it gets a little confusing if that's the only reason you're including him. Why not just not have him say anything about it at all? I mean, now instead we're introducing an article he hasn't really reviewed, that he hasn't relied on, to make a determination on something he doesn't do and is not part of his opinions.
Thank you. So this one I'm going to overrule, I agree with Plaintiff's position in terms of this is the foundational type of thing to actually, and how I would see it is to lay foundation for the jury to actually better understand, as those of us who are more familiar understand easier maybe, but, this doctor does this doctor does that. And so like he said, and he doesn't get into opinions yet, actually, it's fair, this isn't my job, I defer to somebody else is what he's saying, which lays the foundation for that somebody else. So overruled, so you can play those ones.
That's it, Your Honor, I think we are ready to go.
So after him, he's on video, and then who would be? Oh, and this you said is about an hour or so?
Approximately.
Okay, then break.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so Marshall Walker brought to my attention something to think about while the video's being played. Juror number 3, Karina Power, and we can, I'll tell you the phone tag version of what she said, and you all can think about whether you want to have her brought in or not, like during the break. So she said she recognized the witness on the stand, right? So Mr. Carrier, from a possible collaboration between their 2 companies. Again, one of those examples of you don't recognize the name, but when somebody comes in, you might recognize them. She said it wouldn't affect your ability at all, but think about that, and we could, talk about it on what, if anything, that either side wants to do with that. Anything else before we agree with them? Our plan is ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Our next witness will be Dr. Stephen Guthrie, who will be called via video deposition.
Okay.
All right, doctor, can I have you raise your right hand, please, to be sworn? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Dr. Guthrie, can you please give us a summary of your educational background?
Yes, I completed medical school at Oregon Health Sciences University, and then my pediatric residency at Cincinnati Children's, and my pediatric GI fellowship at Cincinnati Children's as well. And I have been at Salt Lake City and the University of Utah Primary Children's since 2002.
Do you have any other post-college degrees?
I do have a Master's of Science degree that was in epidemiology.
And where is that degree from?
University of Cincinnati.
Do you have any board certifications?
Yes, I have board certifications in general pediatrics, in pediatric gastroenterology, and then what's called a certificate of added qualification from the American Board of Pediatrics and the American Board of Internal Medicine for pediatric transplant hepatology.
As part of your practice, do you perform pediatric liver transplants?
No, I do not. That is a surgical procedure. I perform the medical care before and after the liver transplant.
Where do you currently practice?
Primary Children's Hospital,
And how long have you been there?
22 years.
Do you teach anywhere?
I teach fellows, so these are folks that have completed their pediatric residency, and I teach them at the bedside, and sometimes I lecture at the medical school, but not regularly.
Do you treat children suffering from liver failure?
Yes.
Is that a common occurrence?
It's not common where we are. We see a fair number of children just because of our large referral area, but it's not considered a common disease.
What do you mean by your large referral area?
So we take care of patients, at Primary Children's, we take care of patients from Nevada, from Utah, from Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho.
Why is that?
There's no other children's hospital in those areas that offer liver transplantation.
You mentioned that it was, I guess we can call it pediatric acute liver failure is a rare disease. Is that right?
Rare disease has a connotation in terms of how many cases per 100,000 or 200,000 kids. I don't know the precise estimate, but it is. I'll leave it at that. I don't know the precise estimate of whether or not it qualifies as a rare disease. Those numbers are actually set by the federal government.
Do you know approximately how many per 100,000 children suffer from?
I don't actually.
What is acute liver failure?
So acute liver failure is an injury to the liver that results in primarily the inability of the liver to perform its metabolic functions.
Is liver failure a serious disease?
Yes.
Is it life-threatening?
Yes.
If a child suffers from liver failure that does not resolve, what are the treatment options?
It depends on the cause. And if there's an identifiable cause, there's a variety of treatments we can use. But if there is no identifiable cause or it doesn't respond to medications, then liver transplantation is the only option.
And when you say the only option, that's the only option as opposed to what?
There's some causes of liver failure that we can identify a cause, and there are targeted therapies for those.
And if there is no identifiable cause or the targeted therapy does not work, then it requires a liver transplant. Is that right? And without the liver transplant, is the patient's life threatened?
Yes.
So not all the patients that you treat for acute liver failure require liver transplants.
That's correct.
How frequently does an acute liver failure patient require a transplant?
Oh, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
Generally, would you say it's rare or common?
I guess it would be anywhere from 10 to 30% require liver transplant. Depends on the cause and depends on how ill the patients are when they get to us.
You mentioned your background in epidemiology.
Yes.
Can you explain what epidemiology is?
It's the understanding of the burden of diseases in populations.
And what do you do with epidemiology?
I study rare cholestatic liver disease in children, both the underlying genetic causes as well as the outcomes.
And does your background in epidemiology assist with your daily practice?
Yes, I think so.
Do you have a supervisory role at Primary Children's Hospital?
Yes.
So let's turn our attention to the 5 children involved in this case. You provided care and treatment to each of the 5 children, correct?
Yes.
And in your role at Primary Children's Hospital, were you also responsible for overseeing their care?
Yes.
And did you also personally saw them?
Yes.
So with respect to the 5 children, were all 5 of them transferred to Primary Children's Hospital via light flight?
I don't know. I think, I don't know how many I believe they were, but I don't know. They were all.
Does a transport by light flight indicate anything regarding the seriousness or urgency of the medical condition?
Yes, usually.
And what does it indicate?
It's life-threatening illness or the need for higher level care that can be provided locally.
Did all of the 5 children present at Primary Children's Hospital with acute liver failure?
Yes.
And were all of them transported to Primary Children's Hospital for potential liver transplantation?
Yes.
Were liver needle biopsies conducted on some of the children?
Yes.
What is the purpose of a liver needle biopsy?
The purpose is to establish a diagnosis and sometimes inform prognosis.
Do you personally perform these procedures as part of your practice?
No, they are performed by interventional radiology.
Are you familiar with the procedure?
Yes.
Can you describe the procedure?
Yes. Under ultrasound, the child is either sedated or placed under general anesthesia. And under ultrasound guidance, the interventional radiologist uses a needle that is hollow, and the needle goes into the liver very quickly, gets a core of tissue out of the liver, and then that is looked at with a microscope.
Does fibrosis mean scarring?
Yes.
When a patient has fibrosis, is it potentially permanent?
Yes.
Is there a risk that the fibrosis can advance and cause further scarring?
Yes.
Was an etiology identified for any of the 5 children's liver failure?
No.
In terms of the clinical workups for each of the 5 children, was there suspicion of possible toxic exposure as the cause of each of their acute liver failures?
There's not really diagnostic tests that were supportive of that, other than a speculation based on the biopsies.
Was it remarkable to you to have 5 children from one metropolitan area present to you with acute liver failure of unknown etiology so close in time?
Yes.
Why?
So I don't, like I said earlier, I don't know the incidence, the number of cases per 100,000, but we don't see 5 cases from one metropolitan area in that short of a period of time. That's not, we don't see that here in Salt Lake. In the metropolitan area, I think, is approximately the same size as Las Vegas. It's just a rare, it's not something we see.
Can you tell us how you and Primary Children's Hospital discovered the link between these 5 cases?
I did, the only possibility that I saw that they were linked was just how close they were in time and their location. But we did not explore a potential common source.
You just realized the unusual link.
Yes.
Okay. Did you report?
Not necessarily the link, but the timing and the number and the location.
So would you characterize this as an unusual cluster of
Yes.
cases? Did you report the unusual cluster to a public health agency?
I did.
Did you do it personally?
I did.
Which public health agency did you make the report to?
The Southern Nevada Health District.
And can you tell us generally about what happened when you made this report?
Yeah, of course. The report was, I made the report of the first 3 cases on 11/23/2020. I was directed to a website with, I eventually had a form that I filled out and I sent to the public health authorities at the Southern Nevada Health District.
And what did you say when you made the report?
I told them that there was an unusual number of cases of acute liver failure at one place at our hospital, and that they all came from Las Vegas or the Las Vegas metropolitan area.
Why did you make the report?
Just a number, as you said, it was an unusual number of patients in a single cluster in time.
And what's the concern there?
Common source outbreak.
And when you say common source outbreak, what are you referring to?
That they're possibly linked as in etiology.
And what types of etiologies can generally be linked?
Generally, it's infection that we worry about, but also other exposures.
Would that include toxic exposure?
Yes, it would.
At some point, did you learn of a common denominator between all of the children?
I did.
And what was that common denominator?
The hypothesis was that this was a alkaline water product.
Your understanding was that all of the children had consumed the same brand of alkaline water.
That was my understanding, but to be clear, I did not conduct the outbreak investigation.
Understood. I'm just asking about the information that you were made aware of. And when did you learn this?
I think it was I think it was the spring of 2021, but I don't recall the exact date.
And how did you learn it?
In conversations with the CDC representative at the Southern Nevada Health District.
Do you recall that person's name?
It was Jeannie Ruff.
Okay, I'd like to go through some of the medical records related to the 5 children. I'm going to start with Hera, who her records are going to be, select records are going to be marked as Exhibit 8 to your deposition. So looking at P000207 for Hera, it shows an admit date of November 12th, 2020 and a discharge date of November 20th, 2020, correct?
Yes.
Do you have an independent recollection of Hera's case?
Yes.
What about her family?
Yes.
Looking at page 211 of Hera's records, under consultant services, there's a request for child therapy services ordered.
Hmm.
Why is that?
I did not order that.
Just generally speaking, is that an order that's common?
Yeah, it's quite common in hospitalized children. This is child life therapy. So those are experts in maintaining sort of age-appropriate activities for children while they're hospitalized.
What is the purpose of that?
To maintain sort of age-appropriate activities, distraction therapy, working, for example, with games or music, sometimes pet therapy.
And what's the goal of this type of service or therapy?
It's therapeutic for the child who's hospitalized.
Is a child hospitalization a traumatic event in your experience?
In some children, yes.
Is there a correlation with the seriousness of the disease?
Based on my experience, yes, but I don't know if that's been formally assessed scientifically.
Here under the physical exam general, there's a reference that Hera seems overwhelmed by large crowded room. Did you observe Hera as overwhelmed?
I don't recall that.
Is that an uncommon occurrence with a 5-year-old child suffering this type of serious disease, that they may be overwhelmed in the environment?
It is a common occurrence. If you recall, this is November of 2020, so many of us were gowned and masked.
Is this type of experience frightening for children?
Can be.
And as you referenced, this is November 2020, which is, the height of COVID, right?
Mhm.
Did that add a degree of complication to the experience that these children went through?
Yeah, it was a complicated time.
Ultimately, over the course of Hera's 8 plus days at Primary Children's Hospital, she began to improve, right?
Yes,
And she ultimately did not need a liver transplant.
correct.
And she was she discharged on November 20th, 2020?
Yes.
Have you seen Hera since she was discharged?
No.
Have you spoken to any of Hera's medical providers since she's been discharged?
No.
Okay, so let's take a look at Severin Morales. His records are under tab 7. So Severin, it was Severin presented at Primary Children's Hospital on November 14th, 2020, correct?
Correct.
Do you have an independent recollection of Severin's case?
I do.
And what about his family?
I only interacted with his father while he was here. And I may have spoken with his mother while she was still in Las Vegas.
What do you remember about Severin's case?
I remember that he was ill. He improved. He had a little bit of a prolonged hospital course. That's pretty much what I remember. His liver recovered quite rapidly. He had evidence of prior exposure to COVID. That's what I remember.
Severin admitted to the PICU?
Can't recall, but that's easily shown.
Looking at this page, 1541 of Exhibit 7, there's a reference to ascites. What are ascites? Discharge diagnosis for.
Ascites.
What is ascites?
Ascites is fluid in the abdomen that collects around the abdominal organs.
Is it concerning?
Yes, but it's common after critical illness. And we do see it after acute liver failure.
When you say you do see it, is it a common occurrence?
But we see it. I don't know if it's common or rare. It's something that it wouldn't be surprising for me to see a patient that had acute liver failure and had ascites.
And what's the concern when ascites is present?
The main thing that we worry about is whether or not there's abnormalities in the liver or the vasculature of the liver, and whether or not that fluid can become infected.
Page also references the core needle biopsy that was performed on Severin.
Yes.
Right, in terms of these problems in Severin's liver, what are the concerns that are associated with that?
So the concerns are pretty similar to what we were worried about in terms of his blood tests. So it's consistent with a liver injury or a liver that is abnormal.
Do these types of diagnoses impact how you view the severity of the liver injury?
No.
Okay, 1618, there's a reference to social work meeting with Severin's mom just to provide support and assess for need. Is this common with pediatric acute liver failure patients that social workers from the hospital meet with the families?
It's common with many hospitalized children, regardless of diagnosis.
And what's the purpose of having social workers meet with these families?
It depends on the family and the nature of the illness. So in this case, when I read this, it looks like the social worker helped for housing options, which is commonly a problem for patients that come from far away. So the RM means Ronald McDonald House.
In addition to being a potentially traumatic experience for the children, in your experience, are these types of hospitalizations with serious illnesses potentially traumatic to the parents or families of the children?
I think it's hard on families when their child's in the hospital.
Is providing social workers and therapy services aimed at helping that ease the difficulty of that experience?
Yes, that's one of the reasons a social worker may meet.
Severin was discharged from Primary Children's Hospital on November 22nd, 2020, correct?
Correct.
And did he return a few days later on November 26th?
So one of the things about these children is that I was involved with their care from November 14th to November 20th. And ours, on I believe November 20th was a Friday. And at 5 p.m. a different doctor takes over. And so I don't recall the date of his rehospitalization nor the details of his rehospitalizations because I was not caring for him.
Since the time that Severin was discharged home, after the second hospitalization at PCH, have you seen him medically?
No.
Have you spoken to anyone about Severin's case?
Anyone specifically?
Anyone, any medical providers?
No.
Anyone else?
No. I'm trying to recall. I do not recall speaking to anyone else.
Let's take a look at Chris Wren.
So can I add something to that sentence to be clear?
Please go ahead.
I did interact with the families after their discharge to coordinate the reports to the Southern Nevada Health District. We did not talk about medical conditions. It was essentially to seek permission for their medical records to go from Primary Children's to Southern Nevada Health District.
And did you personally talk to the families about that permission?
I did.
And I assume they all gave you the permission?
So the purpose of my call was to let them know that somebody from Primary Children's Hospital would be reaching out to them to have the release of information forms sent to them. And since I had a relationship with them, I did not want that to be a cold call. So the actual permission was obtained by Primary Children's.
And did you discuss with them during your call the unusual nature of the cluster of children and the purpose behind the reporting?
Yes,
What did you generally say, to your recollection?
it was unusual to have so many cases of liver failure from one location in a short period of time.
Okay, so back to Chris Wren.
Mm-hmm.
He was admitted on November 15th, 2020, correct?
Correct.
So Barrett arrives on the 12th, Severin on the 14th, and now Chris Wren on the 15th, correct? Okay. Do you have an independent recollection of Chris's case?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes, I do.
And what about his family?
I remember that.
What do you remember?
Nothing specific other than that they were from Las Vegas and they had an ill child and they were very concerned about him. As for the other families, as are all the patients that I take care of in the hospital.
And did Chris Wren present at the hospital after multiple days of fatigue, not eating well, and vomiting?
Yes, that's the history that I see here that I put in my consult.
He was lethargic,
Yes.
The labs were concerning and reflective of acute liver failure, correct?
Yes.
Under medical decision-making differential diagnosis, the last couple sentences of that paragraph say, notably, Dad also had acute liver failure several months ago, though a cause was never identified. This increases suspicion for an infectious or toxic etiology, and we will need clarification on father's ingestion, vitamins and supplements, and whether Christopher has access to them. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Do you recall that Chris Wren's dad also had suffered acute liver failure 4 months prior to Chris Wren's hospitalization at PCH?
So just to clarify, this document is not my own. It was my partner that was on overnight, and the trainee, Dr. McNerney. But in the morning, I did discuss this. What Dad had said was liver failure that he had had. My recollection is that he said that he had liver failure, that it was undetermined what caused it. I did not verify that or look at his medical records to verify that was the actual diagnosis, but I do recall him being under the impression that that was a diagnosis that he had had.
At the time that you were made aware of Chris Wren's father reporting that he suffered acute liver failure for an unknown etiology several months before, you are in total aware of Hera presenting with acute liver failure from Las Vegas on the 12th, Severin presenting with acute liver failure from Las Vegas on the 14th, Chris Wren Jr. presenting with acute liver failure from Las Vegas on the 15th, and Chris Wren Sr. reporting he suffered acute liver failure of unknown etiology a few months prior to this, correct?
That is my recollection. Just would add that as I said, I never verified that the father had acute liver failure. Sometimes families will say one thing and they're under the impression they have one thing, but what they actually have is a different diagnosis. So I never verified that he had acute liver failure by the medical definition, but I thought it was unusual that there is another household contact. For example, there could be genetic problems in the family.
At this point, are you becoming suspicious of the link between these cases?
Based on my recollection, yes.
We could flip to page 190 of this exhibit. Under assessment plan related to Chris Wren's treatment, it says, it is also curious that this presentation of acute liver failure of unknown etiology has occurred multiple times among 3 different patients presenting to the same PICU from a very similar geographic area in Nevada over the course of the past 2 weeks. Our GI colleagues are looking into contacting the appropriate epidemiologic contacts for this. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
After Chris Wren presented with acute liver failure from Las Vegas at or near the same time as Hera and Severin, did you begin to have conversations regarding a link at this time?
I don't recall. It was right around that time, though.
And can you generally describe what those conversations entailed?
Generally, yes, not specifically, since it was a while back, but it was, again, that there are unusual number of patients with acute liver failure in a short period of time coming from one metropolitan area.
And was there a discussion on whether this should be reported?
I suspect there was, again, I don't recall if we had those discussions, but I had at that point decided that I thought it was necessary from a public health standpoint to report these cases. I don't again remember when I decided that, but and I don't remember these discussions. I don't know if this is my note or not. This is not my clinical documentation.
I understand, but you were part of these conversations and discussions personally, correct?
Yes.
And why did you feel that it was necessary from a public health perspective to make the report?
Unusual number of cases, potentially a reason, an outbreak of something that was important for the public health.
Chris Wren, he had previously been diagnosed with autism. Are you aware of that?
I think I recall that.
Is an autism diagnosis significant to the care and treatment of a patient?
Yes, can be.
Why?
Patients that well, all children have struggle when they're in the hospital, and sometimes for patients that carry an autism diagnosis, we use different strategies to help them cope and help to communicate with them.
And on page 299 of this exhibit, there's a reference to the parents expressing a significant concern about the psychological toll on their child and on them of the hospitalization. Do you recall any discussions with them about that toll?
Not specifically, but not surprisingly. I correction, I do recall that they were really wanting to go home and go back to Nevada.
And Chris Wren was discharged on November 19th, 2020. And other than the discussions that you've previously testified about, did you have any discussions about Chris's medical care, any other discussions about Chris's medical care since that date?
No.
Have you medically evaluated Chris Wren since he was discharged on
No.
the 19th?
No.
Okay, let's look at Lyric Williams, who her select records are attached as Exhibit 10 to your deposition. Do you have an independent recollection of Lyric's case?
I do.
What about her family?
Yes, I remember them.
Can you tell us what you recall?
I recall that one of the twins was admitted before the second twin. While we were getting the first twin situated in the ICU, we had heard that the second one was having symptoms as well and was on the way to the emergency room.
Anything else about the care?
No. Nothing unusual.
Same as the other children?
No. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't remember specific things about. Nothing that stands out. Worried parents. Far away from home.
And Lyric and her twin sister London, do you recall how old they were at the time of their admission?
7 months or so. believe. Yeah.
Do you see, is it very often that you see infants around the age of 7 months in an acute liver failure?
I don't have a name, like I said before, I don't have an often, common, or rare, but it is something that we encounter.
In terms of their, based on your general recollection, similar to the other children, life flighted from Las Vegas, acute liver failure, ill, improved, was discharged home. Is that fair?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a little bit of what we're going to mark as Exhibit 12 to your deposition, which is a video of Lyric at Primary Children's Hospital in December 2020.
She just looks like she's older than 7 months. She's so long. Right.
We get some. Dr. Guthrie, is that video a true and accurate depiction of Lyric's condition at PCH in December 2020?
Yeah, I think so. I don't recall her, I don't know how to quite answer that question. That would be, I believe that's what she looked like in that video, I would assume is authentic.
Why would she be on a breathing machine?
So in looking at Lyric's transfer note in my consultation, the decision to put a breathing tube in was done at Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas, so she came with a breathing tube.
Is Lyric's condition in that video concerning to you as a medical provider?
Yes.
Why?
She is mechanically ventilated, has respiratory failure, not moving around like a normal 7-month-old.
Dr. Guthrie, with respect to London Williams, was she the twin sister of Lyric Williams?
Yes.
And was she also treated at Primary Children's Hospital for acute liver failure in December 2020?
Yes.
With respect to Lyric and London, were you concerned that they were also linked to the diseases suffered by the other 3 children?
Yes.
Why?
Again, close in timing and geography.
What do you recall about London's course of treatment at PCH?
Very similar to the other children. What looked like an acute liver injury with evidence of acute liver failure that improved quickly.
And according to the medical records, Lyric and London were both admitted on December 4th, 2020 and discharged on December 14th, 2020. Is that right?
Yes.
And looking at page 378 of Exhibit 11, London Williams Select Medical Records, the last sentence under brief history of present illness says, due to twin sisters' progressive acute liver failure with severe dysfunction due to unknown cause, she was life flighted to PCH for similar concerns. Is that your recollection of the reason London was life flighted to PCH?
So that's not my document, but she was sent for evaluation of liver transplantation.
After London and Lyric were discharged on December 14th, 2020, have you seen either of them since?
No.
Have you evaluated either of them medically since?
No.
With respect to the care and treatment of each of the 5 children in November through December 2020, can you generally describe how the conditions related to COVID affected the normal procedure in the hospital?
I can tell you at the time there was we were much of the time under mask mandates. We had staffing issues that were complicated, meaning that at times physicians would call in sick and would not be able to work, or their family members would be sick and they would not be able to work. I don't remember the visitation policy during that time.
Were all the children intubated?
I don't recall, other than Lyric, and I didn't recall that until you showed the video. I don't recall if they were intubated or not.
Is intubating a child a concerning thing?
Yes.
Why would they be intubated?
So generally speaking, again, painting with broad strokes, I see children that are quite ill, either because their liver is quite sick or they have other organ dysfunction that also impacts their liver. So being in the ICU is not unusual. Seeing patients that are intubated is not unusual.
Are all patients in the ICU intubated?
No.
In terms of a patient suffering from acute liver failure, generally, what are the reasons why they would need to be intubated?
Based on experience, I'm sure there's studies that document this, but based on my experience, the most common reason for intubation would be mental status changes, multi-organ failure, Those are the two.
Why?
Infection.
Why is intubation common with mental status changes?
I wouldn't say that it's common. I don't know the frequency with which patients with acute mental status changes are intubated, but patients that are have acute mental status changes, if they're ill enough, they cannot protect their airway, puts them at risk for having aspiration, which is bodily fluids getting into the lungs.
Okay, I'm going to show you what we're going to mark as Exhibit 1 to your deposition, which is a copy of the notes from the field and the morbidity and mortality weekly report, or MMWR. Acute non-viral hepatitis linked to a brand of alkaline bottled water, Clark County, Nevada, and California, 2020. You are listed as a co-author of this report, correct?
Correct.
What was your role in preparing it?
So the notification of the public health authorities, is the transfer of the facilitating transfer of the records, is the critical reading of the manuscript, as well as editing and including some sentences in the manuscript.
Did you have any involvement with the Southern Nevada Health District epidemiological investigation?
Only reporting the cases.
When you say reporting the cases, are you referring to reporting the 5 children to the Southern Nevada Health District?
Correct.
This MMWR cites an article by several authors, including Corey Burke, that I've attached as Exhibit 3 to your deposition. Have you reviewed this article before?
The first time I saw it was yesterday when I had the electronic documents, exhibits that were provided to me.
And the third, this article is a case series of real water-induced liver injury related to 4 patients. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, it says it's 4 patients. I did not know about this paper.
On the 3rd page of this document, there are images of pathology slides related to the patients. Do you know one way or the other whether these slides show fibrosis or bridging fibrosis for some of the patients under review?
When I review liver biopsies, I always do it with a pathologist. So I rarely make conclusions. I'm trying to think. I don't make conclusions about liver biopsies unless I have an experienced pathologist looking at it with me.
If we can look at Exhibit 13 to your deposition. These are slides of the tissue samples from Severin Morales' liver biopsy, blown up to a magnification of 200 and 100. And you said earlier you reviewed the Severin Morales tissue slides with a pathologist at PCH, correct?
I believe so. I'm trying to remember the date of that pathology specimen.
It was November 17th, 2020.
I can tell you that we'll frequently look at a liver biopsy and have a preliminary discussion with the pathologists about the likely diagnosis. But the formal pathology report may come out several days later. Since Severin was discharged after I stopped taking care of him, I didn't integrate much of his biopsy specimens into his overall clinical course.
In looking at this magnification of the liver sample slide, you can't say one way or the other whether the enhanced slides show any evidence of fibrosis or bridging fibrosis, can you?
Just reviewing the liver biopsy specimens from Severin, just the report on 1542. I would rely on my pathologists.
Have you performed an assessment on any of the 5 children to determine whether they have any continuing injury related to their acute liver failure?
No.
To do an assessment, would you need to see them again and run tests?
Yes.
Assuming that the toxin they were exposed to that caused their injury was hydrazine, would you consider doing a fiber scan on the patients?
I would depend on their physical exam.
Would you want to do some research into hydrazine toxicity as part of any evaluation?
If I had a patient in clinic and that was the possible cause, I would have to look up what hydrazine toxicity does and what the long-term implications are.
And you haven't done that with any of the 5 children, right?
Correct.
All right, that completes Dr. Guthrie's testimony.
Good time to take an afternoon break.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, come back in 15 minutes, so at 3:40. During this recess, you're admonished not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this trial. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of a commentary on the trial or any person connected with this trial by any media of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspapers, television, internet, and radio. Do not visit the scene of events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any posted communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until the case file is submitted to you. See you back at 3:40.
Please rise for the jury.
Are we all ready in here? Yes, sir.
Your Honor, it appears that we're going to be a little ahead of schedule. Hopefully the court will finish Mr. Morales won't have a problem with the break a little early.
Sure.
Okay. You guys have it?
Please rise for the jury.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for your service and for your patience. Are plaintiffs ready to continue?
Yes, Your Honor, next plaintiff, or the next witness will be plaintiff George Morales.
Okay.
Mr. Morrell. Right this way, sir. Please watch your step. You will remain standing and raise your right hand. Say the pledge to be sworn in.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated, state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Jorge Morales, Jorge, last name Morales.
Good afternoon, George. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name's George David Morales.
Where are you originally from?
Born in Mesa, Arizona.
Did you grow up in Arizona?
I did. I went to high school, played sports out there. Sorry, it's a little emotional right now. Yeah, I spent most of my life in Arizona. I've been in Vegas about 20 years.
When did you move to Vegas?
In 2006.
And how old were you?
I was 27.
How many children do you have?
I have one.
Separate.
Yes.
Tell us about Severin's mom. What's her name?
Her name is Delaney Walker. We prior to him being born in 2018, we were together for a couple years. We decided we were in love and wanted to have a baby, so we proceeded to try having a kid.
And you had Severin.
Yes.
And you two no longer together?
We are not. We are very great with co-parenting. We can communicate a lot. I've started to invite her family over to functions, Easter parties, graduation party, to show him that, you know, two parents can still be friends and have that relationship, so he's not wondering what happened in the long run, you know.
Make it work.
Yes.
Tell the jury a little bit about your personal life. What are the kinds of things you like to do in your spare time?
We like to do a lot of hiking. We try to go to jumping places. It's stuff that he enjoys to do. We are a very active family. I'm constantly trying to do something with him because we're trying to feed his brain with anything possible, education-wise. Just try to have a lot of fun.
You're a cancer survivor, correct?
Yes, I am.
When were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in the beginning of the pandemic. It was January of 2020. Then proceeded to have the surgery done, and then I went through chemotherapy. And then after that is when Severin got sick. So pretty much after it got done with chemotherapy, he got sick.
Are you cancer-free?
Yes, sir.
Congratulations. Since when?
Since January of last year.
Let's transition to why we're here. Can you tell the jury when you started drinking real water?
I was on a kind of house kick at the time in 2016. I started to, catch the buzz of everything going on with real water. The studies with alkaline water being supposed to be good for you. So I started using it, got the little liter bottles before I went to the gym. Very convenient. They were everywhere, every store possible. So I started drinking it once I started getting into shape.
Did you ever purchase the 5-gallon home delivery?
Yes. I had a friend that separated with his wife, so he needed a place to live. So he's the godfather to my kid. So he moved in, and we talked about getting some type of service, something that's a little more convenient than having to go to the store and buy gallons of water or liters of water. And then we both agreed, alkaline water, leading, I guess, to our knowledge, being good water. So we ordered it and had it delivered to the house.
And did Severin live with you at least part of the time when you were getting the 5-gallon home delivery?
Yeah, he actually was living with me majority of the time. During the pandemic, I had him 5 days a week, so this time he was about, almost 2 years old. So he drank nothing but real water with his bottles of formula and stuff like that. It was our primary source of food for him because at 2 years old, from what I know, kids don't really have a big appetite, so at the time he was drinking a lot of bottled waters. Not bottled waters, well, bottled for his formula, but
When did Severin get sick?
early November, started to notice just totally imbalanced. If you see my kid's eyes, he's got big, brown, beautiful eyes, and it was just like, you could see his eyes just get massive, and, you know, kind of when he looked at you, it was like almost like he was kind of staring through you. It wasn't where it was that loving kid where he's looking up at his father and just happy. It just, you can see straight in his eyes that something was wrong. I did put him in a bath, and I sat him down, and I turned for a quick second, I looked back, and he toppled over. Which that was the first indication of, you know, me being scared, because I wasn't sure why my son was not him. You know, it's hard to see as a parent.
Shane, can we please pull up Exhibit 603, page 19? The symptoms you observed in Severin in the beginning of November prompted you to take him to Summerlin Hospital, correct?
Yes.
And under history of present illness, says that you had reported imbalance and vomiting every 30 minutes, 1 hour since yesterday evening, decreased activity and appetite. Do you recall those symptoms?
Yes, sir.
What was going on with Severin at this time?
Again, at age 2, the appetite didn't seem like it was there, so kind of thought that was normal at the time because, you know, of stuff you hear. I mean, I'm a fairly new father, so I kind of take direction from older family members and stuff like that, and a lot of them used to speak on, you know, not having appetite at 2. So kind of thought it was normal, but when I started to notice the disbalance and then the vomiting was just, it's scary. It was a scary situation, so. To see your kid just not being normal at all, like catwalk, he lay down a lot, at that age didn't speak much, but even then, like even the Google and gaggling, they weren't coming out of him. It was just like, he just wasn't there. And when you see your kid just dizziness, it was this dizziness, vomiting, lethargic. I mean, he couldn't even hold his own bottle up. To me, that was just probably the scariest moment of my life, because you just see your kid limp and not being able to function like he normally does.
Prior to this, did you experience any serious illnesses with Severin beforehand?
No, your typical runny noses, stuff like that. I mean, nothing too major. I mean, you know, little colds like that, you kind of just weather the storm and go through it. But a situation like this was just probably 100-fold.
And at this point in time, you were no longer together with Delaney, correct?
We were not, no.
And so in a co-parenting situation and your kid's sick, I imagine you're sharing updates and concerns with her?
Yes, so I'm very communicative. I come in a long line of food and beverage, so my reason for a lot of these pictures and videos was to communicate with his mom and have her understand what was going on at the time. At that time, we weren't speaking very well, but at the same time, we still tried to communicate the best we could for my son. So,
You were particularly concerned with the imbalance that you saw in your son, is that right?
yes. And like I said, when you looked in his eyes, it wasn't like staring or looking at your father or your mother or a relative. It was just kind of just a blank stare. I mean, that's not something any parent wants to look at their kid like, you know.
And you mentioned you took some videos of the imbalance to share with Summer's mother. Right? Shane, could we please play Exhibit 797 and then Exhibit 798? Is this one of the videos that you took to send to Laney?
It is.
Had you ever heard of symptoms like this before in a child?
No,
Were you concerned at this point?
very concerned.
And you take him to Summerlin Hospital, right?
Yeah, we proceeded to take him to Summerlin Hospital, go in the ER, and they noticed that he was dehydrated. And you can see it in the skin, like he was just super dry. Just so they proceeded to do tests on him, and it was just one test after another because obviously nobody knew what was going on. It was just a constant poke and prodded this whole time, just doing test after test after test.
What did the doctors at Summerlin Hospital tell you about Summerlin?
They informed me that he had an enlarged liver. They also said that he had a possibility of having appendicitis. So at the time, I was confiding with some relatives that have been, that are doctors and also customers of mine. Getting all this information from the doctors at Summerlin, it was more like, gibberish to me because I don't know what ALT means and, acute liver failure or, a large liver and what that entailed of. So it was scary. It was scary with the fact being that, they're telling me that, oh, you got a large liver, but you also have appendicitis. So all these numbers were thrown at me, and at that time, I just couldn't fully function and understand everything. So that's when I called one of my cousins up. He's a general surgeon on the East Coast. And I had to put him with the doctor and let him, talk, their language. And then my cousin just told me, it's like, listen, the underlying issue is his liver. So get him out of Vegas and get him to Utah ASAP. At that point, I'm losing my mind because I don't know what's going on with my baby. That's my best friend. I mean, I spend every day with a kid, and I try to teach him as best as I can, just to see something to this extent is just not normal. You try to protect your kid in everything you do, so seeing him this way is very, very distraught.
Prior to going to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City, did they direct you to go see a pediatric neurologist at UMC?
Yes, so they said that there was a possibility of something neurological, so they said that UMC had a pediatrician for that specialty at UMC, so we did end up going there, like I believe a day or two after Summerlin.
Let me pull up that exhibit real quick for you. So Shane, if you could pull up 603, page 37. George, this is a note from the November 6, 2020 visit at UMC. And under procedures, it references a lumbar puncture. Do you recall that occurring at UMC?
Clear as day. Hearing your kid scream like that from a spinal tap, and just imagine like going through chemotherapy and doing all that you need to do to get yourself right, but then seeing your kid poked and prodded after that. I mean, it was, to hear him screaming, like, I had to hold him in my arms. I was the only one there at the time. His mom didn't come for probably like 4 or 5 hours, so lack of sleep, my body's fatigued because I'm just not eating or drinking anything, and nobody in the hospital helps you with your kid. Like, you have to hold your kid. I mean, the kid's like, 30 pounds, screaming and crying and doesn't know what's going on, and he's just getting these injections it was almost every hour. They just kept doing, your test after test after test just to see, if it was something that,
So for the lumbar puncture and the spinal tap, did you observe the procedure?
I did.
Can you describe what it entailed?
They go into your spine, they put a needle in there and pull out, I don't know exactly what they pull out of there, but that needle's pretty long. It's not something where it's just you're gonna get a shot in your arm and it's gonna go away. Like, he was crying nonstop. I mean, yeah, it was definitely a scary experience.
And we could see from the note that they're doing this procedure because they're suspecting a differential of encephalopathy. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did anyone tell you that it was potentially hepatic encephalopathy at this point? Do you recall any of the doctors telling you that they were concerned about hepatic encephalopathy at this point?
I don't recall it, to be honest.
They just knew something was going on with his brain, and they wanted to do this procedure to see if they could figure that out.
Correct.
How was Severin's demeanor at this time? Was he consolable?
No. I mean, he didn't know what was going on. Every time they come in, he'd freak out, throw his head back, everything that. My lower back at the time was killing me because holding him up like that, he just kept throwing himself back and screaming and crying.
When they performed this procedure, where did they insert the needle?
Back over here by the neck, under spinal.
Do you recall seeing the needle?
I did recall it. It was about 2 inches long.
Were they able to give you any answers at UMC?
They gave us a couple. What they said was wrong with him at the time was their diagnosis was he had vertigo, and then his test came back positive for COVID. So upon that, we got the people in their hazmat suits in there, and they're like, all right, well, you got COVID, it's time to go. And they pretty much told us they released us, and we went back home.
And after you were discharged from UMC on November 6th, did Severin's symptoms continue?
They did continue. They pretty much, I felt like they were worsened because he started going limp, lethargic, sleeping he slept for probably like 14, 15 hours straight. The only thing I could do is lean into him and hold his bottle and let him try to eat while he was, I guess, somewhat out of it. That's when it got really scary, so I took him back to Summerlin.
And at Summerlin, between the time that you were discharged from UMC on the 6th and the time that you took him back to Summerlin, the records show it was on November 13th, Was Severin continuing to drink real water?
Yes, we were. At the time, we didn't know exactly what it was, where it was coming from. I feel like for the most part, give him a good diet, I feel like I guide him to not eat a lot of sweets and stuff like that, so, we just kept drinking real water, thinking that, it was good water.
And his symptoms continue and you take him back to Summerlin, correct? At Summerlin Hospital, did they do blood work?
Yeah, they did, like I said, it was almost like a full day, they just kept doing blood work after blood work after blood work.
What were the blood draws like with Severin?
Hard. It was super hard to see, like I said, after my experience of what I went through, to see your son just constantly being poked, and I couldn't find the veins. His veins were really hard to find because they would keep rolling. So, I mean, there's, I think one time, I think he got poked at least 20 times because they couldn't find his veins. It was really, really hard to get.
And Shane, could you please put up 603, page 78? And in the middle of the page, there's the AST and the ALT. And according to these records at Summerlin Hospital, Severin's AST was 3,942, and his ALT was 886. Did the doctors express concern to you about Severin's liver?
Yeah, they had concerns on it. They said they were trying to diagnose him with appendicitis, so they were kind of like really not sure on what it was. That's why they just kept doing all these tests on him. But like I said, once my cousin spoke to the doctor, he did express to me how urgent it was because his levels were so high.
Did you have trouble understanding what the doctors were telling you about Severin?
I did. Like I said, the majority of the time I was there by myself. I wasn't sleeping. And even at my house, I had no help. I was pretty much a single father at the time.
And I think you mentioned earlier that at this time, your cousin, who's a physician on the East Coast, was helping you with the discussions about what to do?
Correct. He said that underlying issues, the liver, do not let them take his appendix out because if they were to treat him and put him under with the narcotics, that he would not make it. So right then and there, I sat down with the doctor and I told him, let's get him out of here. I'm not waiting another second.
And based on these numbers, did the doctors at Summerlin Hospital tell you that they could not provide the liver treatment that Severin needed?
Correct. So my family's from Arizona, so my cousin originally was a doctor in Arizona, so we were trying to get my son to go to primary up in Arizona. But because of the fight for life, it only went to certain areas. They said that Utah was the next best thing, so I'm not going to fight them out of there.
At the time, did you still have family in the Phoenix area?
Yes, my mother. She's probably the biggest help of that since having my son.
So let's make sure we're clear on this. At Summerlin Hospital, the doctors are telling you he needs to go to a special hospital to treat potential liver transplant. Is that right?
Correct.
And they were recommending Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City?
Yes, sir.
And did you ask them if it was possible if you could go to a hospital for that care in Phoenix?
I did, yes.
And generally, was it a possibility that the hospital in Phoenix could have potentially provided the care that Severin needed?
There was a possibility, but just the fact that when my cousin expressed how intense his liver was, for me to either drive to Arizona or for my kid to get on a flight like Southwest or something to go to Phoenix, it was just too much time in between. This is why we focus more on Utah.
Was there a problem with the transportation to get Severn to Phoenix?
Yes.
Was there a flight for life available?
No, not for Phoenix, no.
Was there a flight for life available to take him to Children's Pediatric Hospital,
Yes.
Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City?
Yes, sir.
And due to the urgency, is that the reason why?
I don't know what the question is. So you can finish the question.
Due to that urgency that you just described, did the doctors tell you that you should go to Primary Children's Hospital right away?
Yes, I think we flew out within less than an hour. They got us in the ambulance, drove us to the airport, put us in the fight for life, and we were out.
Severn's mom, did you or did Severn's mom accompany him on the flight for life the first time to Primary Children's Hospital?
I had his mom go, just so I can get everything situated at home to transfer over to Utah. So I went and got clothes and everything, got ready. She flew out, and then I came the next day.
Shane, can you please put up Exhibit 603, page 97? Now, this is an exhibit we looked at with Mr. Carrier. You filled out a similar authorization and consent for life flight transfer, correct?
Yes.
And if you look at the bottom, Shane, there's a signature. George, is that your signature? Under the signature of patient representative?
Yes.
Do you recall filling out this document?
I did, yes.
And again, looking at the top, Shane, under diagnosis, did the doctors at Summerlin tell you that Severn was being transferred because he was in acute liver failure?
Yes.
And if you look down to medical benefit, Shane, George, did the doctor tell you that he needed to go to Primary Children's Hospital for a liver transplant evaluation?
Yes.
And under medical risk, Shane, George, do you recall the doctors informing you that one of the risks of not going was a worsening of Severn's condition or death? After Severn's put on the life flight and he and his mom are transported to Primary Children's Hospital, what happened next?
I caught a flight to Utah, got there to relieve his mom. So I had got a room for us to stay at, not too far from the hospital, somewhere where they kind of coincide with the hospital. It's, I forgot the name of the hotel, but that's where a lot of the parents stay when kids are going through what they're going through the hospital. So as soon as I got there, I went straight to the hospital and they proceeded to keep doing test after test after test. I mean, they would put this big old, what was it, like a board, just to kind of go out for what they're gonna do. And it was like almost every 30 minutes they were coming in and waking him up and trying to poke him, and you know.
Shane, can you please put up Exhibit 625? What are we looking at on the screen here?
It's almost like they did like a checklist. That's what I was speaking about. They do a checklist on, you know, what they're gonna do for that day, what the goals are to try to get them to.
And on here we see on the Tuesday plan was for Severn's liver biopsy.
Yes.
Were you present for that procedure?
I mean, I was around for most of it. I couldn't, I mean, everything was so blurry. Like I said, everything was just crammed together for me with the lack of sleep and everything. So, and him getting poked so many times, you don't really know what's what until they come in and explain everything to you.
Um, Shane, could you please put up exhibit 603, page 132? George, if we look at the top, the admit date and discharge date, it shows November 14th through November 22nd, 2020, correct?
Yes.
Is that the length of time that Severin was in primary children's hospital the first time?
Yes.
And under the brief medical history, see a previously healthy 22-month-old with acute liver failure, vomiting, vertigo, increasing somnolence, which is the lethargy or sleepiness, the transaminitis, the elevated AST and ALTs, hyperbilirubinemia, coagulopathy, ammonia, elevated ammonia levels. Do you recall Severin experiencing these symptoms and issues?
Yes.
At Primary Children's Hospital, was Severin admitted to the PICU?
Yeah, he was admitted to PQ, I believe for the first 4 days. That's where the majority of the doctors were there, talking amongst each other, trying to figure out what was going on.
Were there restrictions on your ability to visit Severin in the PICU?
Yeah, so they only allowed one parent at a time. So we tried to just go in shifts. Me and his mom would probably be there like 12 hours, or I would go a little longer just to help her let her sleep in the room. Very stubborn, so I tried to be there as much as I could. But I ended up getting sick myself, so then I was down for a couple days. Fever, chills, so I had to go back to the room and just kind of get myself better because I was kind of deteriorating myself.
That brings up a good question. How were you dealing with this all emotionally?
At times when I can't sleep at night, I'll look at my son and I'll look at his chest and I'll see if, it's going up and down. Those are what I go through as a parent after seeing him go through what he went through. Any cold, any stomach hurting, like I'll go to his doctor and I'll say, hey, can you feel on his liver, see if it's enlarged? And that's my first question every single time I go take him to the doctor. Even if it's just a cold or something, because you're just so traumatized from what happened. You never know, like you go from being such a healthy kid and loving and playful to just being not there.
At the Primary Children's Hospital in this time period, what was Severin's temperament like?
Always crying, didn't know where he was at, just always looking for us for some type of comfort. And it was hard because when your kid is hooked up to all these machines and you've got IVs in his, he doesn't know, he's just looking at these things. I mean, they had to bandage his IVs so tight to his body because he didn't know, like he would keep grabbing for him and, in pain and agony and just crying nonstop. I mean, it was very hard for us to calm him down. There was nothing. I mean, he loved Toy Story, and even that couldn't get him to calm down. It was just something where he wasn't in his normal self, so he was always freaking out.
Did the difficulties with finding veins persist at Primary Children's Hospital?
They did. A lot of the experienced nurses that were in there, they kind of explained that, they have a certain percentage of finding veins, and even their top people couldn't find his veins. And they eventually started bringing a vein finder. Every now and then they would use the vein finder, but for the most part, they always tried to just do it themselves. They weren't finding it.
While Severin was admitted in PCH, was he drinking real water?
No.
Did he start to improve?
He did. Once you get the IVs in you and you're getting that fluid through you, you kind of see a little bit more life into him. It still took a while to get him rehydrated, but I mean, you can tell the difference of, when he was in that state of mind to where, he was getting his fluid in.
And tell the jury what happened when Severin was getting ready to be discharged.
Upon getting ready to be discharged, he did catch another virus while being in the hospital. It was called the rotavirus. So that attacks your stomach. So he was vomiting. He had diarrhea like every 10 minutes. So what was coming out of him wasn't going into him. So they had to put him back on an IV. Because the way everything was going, it was super imbalanced, so they had to do something to balance it out. So they had to put him in an IV again, and that kept us there another couple days, just to get him back right again.
Eventually, Severin was discharged on the 22nd, correct?
Correct.
And how did you return to Las Vegas?
We drove back with the rental. He did sleep the majority of the time, coming back from Utah to Vegas. Still seemed not 100% straight, but you can tell in his eyes.
The first time, after your discharge from primaries, and the first time, did you fly home with Severin?
Everything, like I said, it kind of goes on, because we were constantly going everywhere, so I believe that was the first time.
Let me show you a picture. Shane, if you could pull up exhibit 635. What does this photo show?
This is when me and my mother flew back with Severin. Like I said, I don't recall if that was the first time or second time. But as you can tell right there, still doesn't seem right. Even when he would sit up and we would talk to him, he would still didn't seem 100% right.
After you returned home from the first hospital stay at primaries, what happened next?
Again, to just kind of get back on track again and get him back to try to eat some food, because at this point he was taking in nothing but liquids. It was Pedialyte or Pediasure that we would give him to just kind of fill in the gap for food. I did notice he still wasn't, he was kind of still unbalanced. It just didn't seem right. He just kind of started seeing the symptoms again. So, of course, after that first time, something's wrong. So you got to hurry up and go. So I did the same thing. Took them straight to Summerlin and proceeded to try to get them to bring him back, because there was something wrong still.
And did the doctors at Summerlin want to send him back to PCH?
Yes. So upon that, they, with the problems with not finding his vein, they decided to put a port in his neck so they can administer fluids and stuff like that. So when they did that, they put a tube down his throat because they had to knock him out. And then that helped him breathe. And the doctor said as soon as he starts coming to, we'll come back out, we'll pull it out. Unfortunately, that turned into almost 8 hours. From my knowledge, once you start helping somebody breathe with tubes, it kind of really makes your lungs not really function properly from what I've they saw the similar symptoms, so they decided to send us with the life of flight, and I went back with them this time.
Shane, if you could pull up exhibit 603, page 311. Where this is the medical note from the life flight on it is the 23rd. This says that he's returning via life flight back to PCH. And in the second paragraph in the middle, it says upon presentation on 11/22, his LFTs, INR, ammonia were normal. He was intubated upon arrival due to altered mental status and difficult IV access, and had an IJ placed and a sedated brain MRI, and then extubated prior to transfer to PCH. Is that what you were just referring to in terms of the sedation and the intubation?
Yes.
And the port you were referring to that they placed, that was because of the difficulty with finding his veins.
Correct.
And then you returned with them this time on the life flight to PCH.
Yes.
Shane, if you could pull up picture exhibit 622. Is this a photo of Severin in the hospital at Summerlin prior to the transfer to PCH for the second time?
Yes.
And is this the intubation you were referring to?
Yes, and it's a constant reminder when I look at my kid because he still has scars right here on his neck, and that just kind of keeps reminding me. And that alone was probably one of the worst things I've seen him go through. Like not just have to lay there and just kind of wait for the doctors to come work their magic for your kid, and it's hard to see him down like that.
Shane, could you please pull up exhibit 624? Is this a picture that you took of Severin on the life flight with him?
Yes. That was his favorite little hat that he likes to wear. Kind of was freaking out on the plane, so his arms were being thrown, so I had to hold him down for a little bit.
Shane, can you pull up picture 623? Is this another picture of him on the life flight?
Yes, sir.
Upon arriving at PCH, was Severin again admitted to the PICU?
He was, they kept saying like his numbers were going lower, but again, when you still see the symptoms and see that in him, it just didn't sit right with me. That's just why I have to bring this back over there.
And this is, well, let me ask you, what else do you remember about the second stint at PCH?
I mean, at that time, it's a big blur, and it's just them stating that, you know, his levels were going back to normal, that there's really nothing more that they could do at that point.
He was hospitalized at PCH the second time between November 26th and November 29th, correct?
Right.
Was it Thanksgiving at this time?
I don't recall it, yes.
Do you recall how you and Severin spent the Thanksgiving holiday that year?
To be honest now, holidays weren't in my focus or my reach, you know.
Shane, can you please put up exhibit 629? Is this a picture of Severin at PCH?
Yes.
Do you recall whether this was during his second stint?
I believe so.
How is Severin doing today?
Severin's good. He's a good kid. He's got a lot of life to him. He's got a lot of love. Very smart. You know, loves his family, loves his nana. He's just a good kid. Listens. He wants to do better for himself, and you know, I try to tell him certain things about foods and like that, and he gets it in his head. He's like, he wants to eat healthy stuff. You know, he won't eat certain things because I told him it was junk food. You know, he loves pizza, and I told him it wasn't very healthy food, and now he doesn't want to eat it anymore because to him in his head it's not healthy. Even though his dad is very large.
Do you notice any behaviors or things that concern you about Severin today?
I mean, everything concerns me about him. I mean, he's it's not too much concerning on that end. I mean, he does have his moments where, you know, he'll tell me he has a stomach ache or his stomach hurts. You know, he's able at this age now to kind of tell me, hey, I don't feel good or something's, you know, not right. So I always jump to the highest, you know, alert because it's one of those things you don't want to let happen again.
You were here for Mr. Carrier's testimony, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware of the permanent injury, the potential permanent injuries that the children have suffered, correct?
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking to think that he could be affected this when he gets older. Like, you know, we make our decision as parents to what we do to our own body, but when it's a kid that's suffering something that he had no control over, and to think that down the road that he's gonna have difficulties, it's like, I'm 44, I'm over here trying to prepare my kid and tell him, you know, he can't do certain things, or when he gets older, he's not gonna be able to have a cocktail, or, you know, it's my mind goes 100 miles an hour, but to just think that something can go wrong with him down the road, like, you wanna try to prepare him as a parent and lead him into a more healthier environment, I guess. But it's still scary, because you never know what's gonna happen.
In terms of the future medical monitoring and there's various services that have been recommended by plaintiffs' experts, are those things something that you're committed to doing for Severin?
100%, yes.
And what about for yourself?
Yeah, I want to not carry this on for the rest of my life. I would like to be able to eventually not be such on like pins and needles when it comes to my kid. You know, it's like, you want to live your life like that. It's bad enough that, you know, you're always going to worry for your kids as parents, but, you know, knowing that there's something possibly wrong down the road, it's even worse.
Thank you, Jorge. I know this isn't easy.
Any cross?
Mr. Morales, Charlotte do for Real Water. Thank you for sharing with the jury what you went through and what Severin went through. Very sorry for that. Obviously, Real Water made your child sick, and that was a terrible experience. I'm sorry about that. The amount of medical costs that you had to pay for Severin's treatment is about $352,000. Does that sound right to you?
Yes.
Obviously, Real Water is responsible for that. I want to ask you currently, how you doing?
At this moment, my nerves are pretty all over the place.
That's natural. We'll get you out of here in a minute. Have you personally sought any counseling after what happened?
No, not personally. As being like the sole provider of my kid, it's kind of try to put your head down and keep working for, as it gets older, you kind of just want to focus on it and move forward on it.
Yeah, and that's understandable. Have you sought any counseling for Seven?
I have not yet, though.
It sounds like he's doing fairly well. He's going to be 6 in December, is that right?
He will, yes.
Is he in school?
He just graduated pre-K in July.
Congratulations. How did pre-K go?
Great. He really likes to interact with these teachers, and they're definitely learning a lot.
What's his favorite subject?
I don't know, subject from pre-K. I mean, playing, recess.
I think mine was recess. One of the things that they sometimes do is, which is amazing, they ask the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Ask them that in kindergarten, pre-K. Did they ask that of Seven?
They did. He said he wants to be a rapper and a YouTuber.
Good for him. I think we may even have somebody on the jury that can that. Mr. Morales, again, thank you very much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Any questions from any jurors? No? Okay. Thank you, sir. Just watch your head.
Yes, sir.
Is this okay to break for the day?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we'll break a little early in real life, but not like TV. So tomorrow, come back at 11. Plan is, 11, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, I think I had said 9, but it will be 10 on Friday. But 11 through Thursday. So you've heard this a few times. Keep listening to it. Keep obeying it. During this recess, you're admonished not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or any person connected with the trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspapers, television, internet, radio. Do not visit the scene of any acts mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any posting communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not forward or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until it is finally submitted to you. See you back tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Please rise for the jury.
So tomorrow morning, I'll have a exhibit list.
Yes, sir, we can move in all 3 minutes if we get there.
Okay. Yeah, so look at that. Do we have any, or will we have definite objections that I need to rule on tomorrow, or do we know?
Your Honor, I can say that we have one more video cut that I anticipate we're going to need to play. There are some objections to that. I think I have the transcript already here.
I don't need to see it right now unless, will that be the first one we'll be doing tomorrow? Okay, so we could, if needed, we could do that at lunch. I'm just trying to think of anything else.
And one other thing, Your Honor, and I was being cautious about this, Your Honor, but I want the court to give this some consideration. Mr. Odou, and I have not made mention of this, Mr. Odou, so I don't want to catch him off guard. Maybe it's a conversation we can finish up tomorrow. But Mr. Odou has said in opening, and now he said in front of, at least, as a part of his cross-examination, plaintiffs that Real Water is taking responsibility for their medical bills. Well, that's leaving the wrong impression in this jury. Real Water has not paid a single penny for those medical bills. Taking responsibility suggests that they've actually paid the bills. And they've not taken responsibility. They're stipulating to the amount, but they've not taken responsibility. Those are two different things. We have to clean the impression left in this jury about taking responsibility. What I thought is a possible way of Mr. Odou perhaps presenting this in the future is he can indicate that Real Water agrees or concedes, but he can't say that they've taken responsibility because they've taken no responsibility in paying those bills. All of those bills, all of those amounts are out there, and they've become the burden of our clients. So to take responsibility would be to relieve that burden. That has not been done. And so I've been thinking about this the last couple of days, Your Honor, so I'm not requiring or asking the court to require Mr. Odou to respond today. Maybe he needs to take some time to think about this. But, Your Honor, we can't leave that impression in front of this jury. That's not accurate.
Or perhaps a change in phraseology, like he's not disputing the amount of the bill, but to imply that you're actually paying it, that's just ingratiating yourself to the jury.
So let's, no, thank you, let's talk about that tomorrow morning before we bring them in. So come back tomorrow, be here at 10:45, and then you can think about what they said.
We don't have a plaintiff on the morning session, so we can at the same time.
Say that.
We do not have a plaintiff until potentially the afternoon tomorrow.
Okay.
So we don't need to address.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, if I can, I'd like to get that.
Okay. 10:45 is your.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.